Ladies and gentlemen, our glorious king has been buffed. It has been so long since we've actually had the Shadow crossover. The fact that it's finally here, I don't know, some people don't really like it because, of course, people's already experienced it, so it's kind of like a whole nothing burger for them. But to me, I feel like it's kind of hype just because a lot of you guys never ever got this unit, and now you may have him, and he is incredible. And I got quite a few fights just to show him off in today. I will say I hate that the Mines isn't here because the Mines just offers such a good gauntlet of bosses that could really show off his overall power so much better. But what I got for you still is going to show you how much this man is cooking. First and foremost, let's talk about one of Shadow's main strengths and what a lot of people use him for, which is amplifying your damage. And the way how you get him to just do that for your team is very simple. You just throw him on it and you start using that True Art over and over and over again. Shadow's True Art is able to constantly inflict the enemy with a 70% physical res down, on top of the fact that it's also lowering the enemy's evasion rate by 30%. Let's not forget it also has 30 art gauge as well. On that, you're getting a battery, physical res debuffs, and evasion rate. You really can't argue with that. The evasion rate is actually insane too because it comes up so much in in-game. Like every single in-game boss nowadays just has evasion tacked onto them. So having a unit that's buffing up your damage like this while also lowering the evasion rate is insane. You can opt in to use the super art, by the way. He does have a super art that does buff up everybody's damage by 200% if they're not in the status element, which I'm just going to be honest with you, I don't use it too much. I don't think it's that much of a damage increase. I would rather just get more stacks in with my True Art. And you can see here in this gameplay that I'm showing you, that's exactly what I did. And this team is utilizing a team of Okaroon, Orvel D, and then Saitama. The theory with this team is that we lower the enemy's physical res consistently with Shadow, buff up the attack with Okaroon, and then we use Orvel D as our main Archjitter. This isn't even that optimized, by the way. There's a lot of other equips I could have used to buff up my damage even more, which is insane because this team still allowed Saitama to hit for 2 billion damage. Yeah, 2 big ones right there. But that's the philosophy behind it if you're looking to amplify any physical damage character in the game. Pretty much just throw Shadow on there and there's not much thought else. You know, if they're a ratio character, use an attack buffer, then just put an arch in and you're off to the races. But of course, Shadow just isn't this huge damage buffing character. He offers a ton of utility. And some of that utility does include his art. His art is able to give you a huge buff, which is flinch res. The flinch res buff allows you to not be inflicted with paralyze or freeze, so being able to be immune, essentially immune, because you know you can get stuff that lowers that resistance, is insane in any kind of high level content because those are also 2 status effects they love throwing around, which unfortunately I'm not going to show you that being used in this next fight. But what I am going to show you is Shadow kind of being him. This is a team that consists of Hoka, Ultimate Paladin Roy, Sayaka, and Shadow. Really, Shadow is kind of, I guess you would say, the main damage dealer here to an extent. I mean, it's kind of more of a team effort. I don't think there's a singular unit here that's like, okay, he is the main DPS, which is perfectly fine because this entire team has a lot of synergy together. But one thing that's really cool is that if you have a character that applies a massive, just straight physical res down, like, for example, Ultimate Paladin Roy with his Phantom Bullet, and you throw in Shadow, using these 2 characters in conjunction allows you to start the fight with a huge physical res debuff from like Ultimate Paladin Roy for an example, which is 120%, and then you can consistently use Shadow's True Art to stack physical res debuffs on top of the fact that you already have the 120% physical res debuff, which means right out the gate with 1 Phantom Bullet and 1 Shadow True Art, you are at 190% physical res down. That is insane. And then let's not forget, Shadow can just keep stacking that over and over and over and over again. Plus, Ultimate Paladin Roy's Phantom Bullet takes a very long time to fall off. This bad boy lasts for 100 seconds. So you just look to see when it's 1 minute and 40 seconds on the game timer, and then you just use the Phantom Bullet again to make sure that you always have Ultimate Paladin Roy's physical res applied on top of Shadow's physical res, and you can easily hit physical res debuffs that are like 200%, 300%, 400, 500, it doesn't matter. Really, the sky is the limit whenever it comes to these characters, and it makes it to where units that apply a massive physical res down, like Ultimate Paladin Roy, Uzu, Yuzu, so many characters in this game that have that huge physical res down have so much synergy with a character like Shadow, since you can hit numbers that you otherwise thought were not possible. And you'll see here that we wind up using Ultimate Paladin Roy's Phantom Bullet, and we even use I Am Atomic with Shadow, and we wind up just bursting Orvel down all the way. But real quick, before we keep going with some of the gameplay and stuff, one thing that some of you guys may be asking is that, well, what's his best equips? What crest do I go with them? You know, all that type of stuff. And sure, you know, let's talk about it. Equip-wise, I gotta go with his True Weapon every single day of the week. His True Weapon gives him 40% damage and art gauge, passively. It helps him out a ton. And the Arc Gauge passively just works so well on him because Shadow already gives all Dark allies 5 arts per second while he's above 70% HP, which does include himself, by the way, which means that as soon as Shadow loads into the quest, he's giving 7 arts per second as long as he stay above that 70% HP, right? As for the magic slot, I always go with something like Exceeds X here, but if you are fighting like an EX boss in Grand Crusade or whatever, I would highly recommend that you do use maybe some type of status effect equip here instead of like Exceeds X, since, you know, Archgen doesn't matter in EX fights. Just, you know, being able to counter the boss in any way. I feel like this magic slot is very flexible. And as for that 4-star physical, I would personally recommend something like Blaze Coil if you just want to buff up his damage even more. You can also go like some of the Grand Crusade equips that give you a bunch of Arc Gauge and stuff like that now, since, you know, that is a game mode. But anything that you have that gives you like arts in this slot would be really good. I wouldn't recommend Grief, by the way, especially if you are relying on his Archgen in like a mono dark composition. Grief kind of just screws you over, and you don't want to get screwed over. And then as for the crest on this guy, really it's very simple. You can kind of just go attack up and Arc Gauge up and be perfectly fine. If you don't really care about him doing too much damage, I would say probably going Arc Gauge up and maybe Equipment CT, just so he can have like his Dark Res from his true weapon up a lot more often. But really, I think attack up and Arc Gauge up are just gonna be the best thing for you. All right, now back to the video. The next thing we fought was Demon Edge Berwick, and I brought Simon with us, just because I was like, you know what, I can kind of show off how good someone like Shadow is with a character like Simon. These guys like to be in longer forms of content. This will make it to where Simon can be in the spotlight just for a little bit here, but yeah, I didn't get too far with this, and it pissed me off so bad. Instead, I decided to go with Samurai Rimuru. I don't know why I decided to pick Samurai Rimuru, but I did, so here we are. In this composition though, it very much focuses on just Archgening and Shadow being here just to kind of amplify our damage a bit more. If I'm not mistaken, this Berwick does apply some kind of evasion buff to himself as well, like each threshold, so, you know, the evasion rate down is going to come in handy here. But with a character like Samurai Rimuru here, and he is the leader, so he's giving us that 20% DR for like the first 70 seconds of a quest, which is incredible for a quest like this. He's also giving us tons of Arc Gauge as long as we're above 50% HP, which means him and Shadow are actually just supercharged right now. So the entire theory here was just use the art on Samurai Rimuru, give everybody the massive HP buff and the super art damage buff, stack up as much physical res down with Shadow as possible, while also increasing our Arc Gauge, lowering the crit res with Hoka, and then popping off with Samurai Rimuru's super art to hopefully be able to actually beat Berwick pretty easily. Now I will say Berwick's Berwick's evasion buff that he applies is quite high, because if you see in this clip right here, I did actually use Samurai Rimuru's super art, and Samurai Rimuru actually missed all of it, and we had quite a few evasion rate downs already on him. So this goes to show that, yeah, sure, Shadow can allow other characters to hit bosses that have mass amounts of evasion, but even with that, you may still need accuracy equips or an accuracy unit in certain situations. However, at the very end here, if I'm not mistaken, Samurai Rimuru does hit pretty much most of his attacks, and he winds up finishing it himself, right? Pretty sure? Yeah, there it goes. And as you can see there, 19 million from Shadow, 17 million from Samurai Rimuru. Really, we could have just used Shadow as the main DPS, saying that he was hitting it all the time, because I think he was. I don't think he missed pretty much at all. So yeah, to say the least, this guy right here is absolutely correct. If you wind up getting him, I kid you not, this is a unit that you can just throw on your team whenever you need him. You don't really have to think too much about the team comp he's in. You don't really have to think too much about if he's going to get value in this specific fight or whatever. Pretty much bringing Shadow, you're always going to get something with him, especially in Grand Crusade. He's incredible in the mines. He's very good against a lot of the harder fights. Anytime you want to brute force a fight, there's really not a better unit to kind of help you brute force a fight than Shadow, because constantly lowering that physical res is very strong. And unlike Simon, you don't have to worry about this guy's animations whatsoever. Considering that his true art is extremely quick, he's able to apply that physical res debuff and keep up with some of the fastest nukers in the game because of it. So he's really great in nuke comps as well. If you want just that big physical res debuff, you can do it, you know, use him as a equip holder. He has 2 physical slots and a magic. You could do some crazy stuff with Shadow. Really, the possibilities are endless, and you are looking at a character that is easily like a S tier unit in this game. He is incredible. And if you wind up getting him, because that first banner is insane, that's probably the only banner you guys should be summoning on for this collab. The Shadow and Beta banner, incredible banner. If you got him from that, consider yourself very lucky because he is a insane unit. Thank you all so much for hanging out. Tell me down below what shenanigans you're using your Shadow for. Are you able to do certain EX fights now in like Grand Crusade? Have you been able to clear certain Summoner's Road stages now because you have someone like this? Let me know all that type of stuff down below in the comment section. Oh, and one more thing before you all leave, don't forget to drink water.